Hello, everyone. This is Javier Ariza, clinical psychologist. Welcome to this new podcast today about self-esteem and selfishness. And I think it's important to take some time to understand the distinction between two very important concepts, right? I want to start by just sharing a very quick experience during one of my sessions with a patient. And we were talking about, how difficult it was for her to say no to people and being very available. And then at some moment during the session, she goes, Javier, it's just that I just don't want to be selfish. And then I asked her, well, let's think of this. If your best friend were as exhausted as you are, as busy as you are, would you think that she was selfish for saying no to you after one of your requests, for example? And then she laughed and said, of course not. I would tell her to rest. And I told her, exactly. But somehow you believe everyone deserves compassion except you. And that was the moment she realized she wasn't afraid of being selfish. She was afraid of disappointing people. That's not selfishness. That's conditioning. And conditioning can be unlearned. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about this important and often misunderstood concept of self-esteem, right? Not the social media version of it, not confidence as performance, not the loud kind that tries to convince the world of its worth. I'm talking about the psychological definition, right? The quiet, internal sense that you're worthy of respect, care, and consideration simply because you exist. Self-esteem isn't about believing you're more important than others. It's about knowing that you are not less. A lot of people struggle with this idea because they were raised to think that choosing themselves is a form of selfishness. They grew up hearing comments like, don't be difficult, don't be selfish, don't make others uncomfortable, and eventually they learned to shrink. They became adults who apologize for taking up space. Adults who say, it's okay, don't worry about me, even when it's not okay at all. So going back to that story, she was the kindest people you could ever meet. She was warm, generous, and endlessly giving. But she had no sense of where she ended and where others began. She said yes to everything and everyone. Let's say if a friend needed a babysitter, she showed up. Even if she had worked 10-hour shift and desperately needed sleep. If someone needed a ride to the airport at 5 a.m., she was there. Even if it meant canceling her own morning meeting. She rearranged her schedule constantly to accommodate others, even people she barely knew. She canceled dinners she had been looking forward to because someone else suddenly needed her attention. She never charged for her time, her energy, or her emotional labor. She felt guilty even imagining saying no. And when we explore why, she whispers something that so many people silently live by. If I don't say yes, they'll think I'm selfish. Or worse, they'll stop loving me. So this is what happens when childhood conditioning, attachment wounds, or years of people pleasing shape your identity. Your brain begins to confuse self-esteem with selfishness, as if setting a boundary is a moral failure, as if exhaustion is more acceptable than disappointing someone, as if your needs are negotiable, but everyone else's are sacred. So let's make something very clear. There is a massive difference between self-esteem and selfishness. Selfishness says, I matter more than you. Self-esteem says, I matter too. Selfishness takes, demands, consumes. Self-esteem protects, respects, and preserves. When someone has healthy self-esteem, They don't step on others, they simply stop stepping on themselves. The problem is that many people are terrified of being misunderstood. They fear the discomfort of saying no, they fear the label of selfish. So they overextend, they overgive, they over apologize. And in the process, they slowly abandon themselves. They disappear in plain sight. From a psychological perspective, this often comes from attachment experiences where love felt conditional. Children who learned that they are valued when they are pleasing and ignored, shamed, or rejected when they express needs often becomes adults who cannot tolerate disappointing others. Their nervous system interprets boundaries as danger. Their identity becomes tied to compliance, and cognitively, they develop automatic thoughts like, if I say no, I'll be rejected. If I rest, I'm being lazy. If I choose myself, I'm hurting someone. If I protect my limits, I'm a bad person. But these thoughts are distortions, not truth, and they can be unlearned. One of the most powerful tools I teach my patients is a very simple sentence structure. So this is a structure. I feel space when space happens. Then I need space. Okay? So it sounds basic, almost too basic, but it's the foundation of boundaries. So now we're gonna fill up those blanks, all right? So I feel overwhelmed when plans change last minute. I need earlier notice. Another one. I feel drained when I'm always the one driving. I need us to take turns. Another one. I feel anxious when I commit to too much. I need to say no this time. These sentences are acts of self esteem, not selfishness. Another tool comes from CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. When you hesitate to assert yourself, ask, what am I afraid they'll think of me? Is that fear based on fact or imagination? What advice would I give a friend in the same situation? This helps you interrupt catastrophizing and break the emotional fusion between self worth and pleasing others. Self esteem also grows through small, consistent behaviors, micro acts of self respect. Going to bed when you're tired instead of pushing through. Eating before you're starving. Pausing before saying yes. Taking 5 minutes to breathe before responding to a request. These small decisions communicate to your brain, my needs matter. Over time, those choices become a new identity. One of my favorite reframes is replacing people pleasing with value pleasing. So instead of asking, what do they want from me? Ask, what aligns with the person I want to be? This shifts your focus from external approval to internal integrity, which is where true self esteem is built. And finally, there's self compassion, the antidote to shame. When you judge yourself for setting boundaries or choosing rest, try telling yourself, even if someone is disappointed, I'm allowed to take care of myself. Even if I'm imperfect, I deserve respect. My worth is not tied to how much I give. Self compassion softens the fear that you must earn love. When my patient finally began practicing those tools, the transformation was subtle but powerful. She said no for the first time in years. It was to a coworker who wanted her to babysit last minute. She felt guilty, yes. She doubted herself, but she stayed with that discomfort instead of escaping it with a yes. A week later, she declined an early morning airport ride because she was exhausted. She didn't lie. She didn't over explain. She simply said, I can tomorrow. And nothing terrible happened. The world didn't collapse. Her relationships didn't disappear. What did disappear was her belief that she had to sacrifice herself to be loved. Slowly, moment by moment, she stopped living like a background character in her own life. She stopped abandoning herself to be accepted. And she realized something she had never been told as a child. You can choose yourself without rejecting others. You can love people without losing yourself. You can say no without being unkind. You can set boundaries without becoming selfish. Because self-esteem is not loud, it's not dramatic, it's not narcissistic. Self-esteem is the quiet truth inside you that whispers, I'm allowed to take up space. And once you start living from that truth, everything changes. Thank you for listening. Bye bye.